Hello everyone, Silver Contrail here once again with another article, Aftermath. This is, week 6 now? So things are rolling pretty good. I'm liking this series. Might change things up here in the next episode. We'll see. I've got some ideas of what I want to do to spice up the weekly episodes that I'm doing. But anyways, um, stuff to talk about. Lots of things. We've got the last week's article on top picks from the WCQ, which of course I went to and I've been talking about that because it was a really cool experience and a bunch of things related to that. I still haven't told the Siegel story yet, but we had a lot of fun there, and of course there's a lot to talk about that came out of that, and especially this week's article in which I talk about the Ultimate Pegasus Challenge, which is a ton of fun. Actually, probably the best thing I did all weekend was go to the Ultimate Pegasus Challenge and decide to go into that. And I'll talk more about that in the next week's article Aftermath. Of course, if you want to read about that and my experience in that tournament, the tournament where I got to meet the voice actor for Pegasus, then you can go ahead and click the link in the description. As usual, I'm linking both the article I'm going to talk about today and the article that I wrote about for this week. So, where do we begin with this? Top picks from the WCQ. I think it's important to note that there was certain things that were obvious going in. Everybody knew what was at stake, which decks were the top, and which ones. And I have to close Skype because I'm getting called repeatedly. And which ones you need to decide in the majority of cards. So the big side deck card of the weekend was obviously Eradicator Epidemic Virus. It was that one card you could flip and crush a lot of rogue matchups, and one of the most important matchups of the weekend, that was Spellbooks, or Prophecy, however you want to say it. Eradicator definitely came across as one of those cards that you either could run it or you couldn't, and if you couldn't run it, you had to find another solution really quickly. And decks that could run it had this huge advantage over the weekend because they could flip that one card and completely change the duel. And that's not to say that Prophecy players can't come back from Eradicator. They certainly can. But generally speaking, it's very, very difficult for them to do so. So if you couldn't play Eradicator, you needed to play stuff like Naturia Beast, like Spell Canceller, like Droll and Lockbird, be able to really make use of Droll and Lockbird especially, and capitalize on that negation, or that disruption that Droll gives you. I would even go so far as to say that if you can't use Eradicator at all, going into a large-scale tournament like that, you probably could manage to try to main deck Droll and Lockbird, because it's really important that you win that game 1 at that point, because you're suddenly not guaranteed a winning game 2 or game 3. But there's a lot of ways to look at that. You can side things like Prohibition, which works pretty well, at least to shut off the Spellbook of Judgment and kind of stall them out for a couple of turns. If they side in Anti-Spell and Trap Hate against you, then there's that. But at least kind of gives you that edge for a couple of turns. And going forward through I think there's a couple of regionals this month, would definitely look into doing that. Prohibition working against a lot of things now, especially with the new set coming up. It's actually becoming a little bit of a better card. And again, with Typhoons out of the main deck, and depending on how your deck works game 1, whether or not you've got a lot of back row or not, if you're not running a whole lot of back row and they don't side in their Typhoons, Prohibition could be kind of a problem for them to deal with. And they're not really going to want to resolve Heavy Storm all too often on you. And after all, their frequency of drawing into it is only, 15% in their opening hand? But anyways, with Crazy Box, that kind of doesn't... It's not as big a deal if you can't make Eradicator live, because now 99% of decks can make Eradicator live. Do you run 2 level 4s? Yes, okay, you can make Eradicator live. So, one of the only decks in the game that probably doesn't make rank 4s too frequently can do it. So, I mean, even now Prophecy can make Eradicator much more easily. So in the mirror match, you're going to see Eradicators getting fired off, because they can do like double Kaiku if they have to. Or Kaiku in, I think... There's a couple of other ones that I think are level 4, but I don't want to mention them because they might not be. But anyways, yeah, there's definitely some options there with Crazy Box now. Like everyone's got Eradicator access, and it kind of trumps all the other options that you'd side against spellbooks. Things like Puppet Plant, not as important anymore. Even Droll and Lockbird, not as important anymore because you've got that Eradicator. That said, of course, being able to Eradicator when you go second isn't always the easiest thing in the world, especially if you don't draw into it, but also especially because they're going to have the fate to disrupt you to try to take out that monster you want to tribute for Eradicator. So it's not always easy, and that's where Droll comes in handy. So I still think Droll has a place in the format, but its importance is definitely decreased going forward because now everything can make an Eradicator target. The other big card over the weekend, something I didn't see coming, and I talked quite a bit about this in my article, was DNA surgery. I was actually at the event on either Friday or Saturday, and I read something that Jeff Jones had posted on Facebook about people asking about DNA surgery because I guess it was something that was people had realized over the event that DNA surgery is really freaking good against prophecy, that it's a great card to flip and disrupt their plays. It's very easy and accessible, and you flip it and you're good to go. And suddenly you've shut off a lot of their spellbooks. And with that in mind, it shot up in price quite a bit, which is, pretty cool. I think it's like a $3 card now. Whatever. The reason I didn't talk about it before is that when I look at DNA surgery, to be fair, it is a card that gets a lot of talk and combos and discussions, and it never works. And it doesn't do anything because it's really tough to rely on combos that use DNA surgery. But as a piece of disruption, it's not too bad, especially in a deck that has so many support cards that absolutely depend on them being a certain type. Now, I almost would say that this would be kind of a cool pick against Fire Fist, but unfortunately, they can still tanky into a gorilla and then ruin your day. But it's an interesting card anyways, and especially an interesting card because you can do things with the Evolzars, so you can change the type of your monsters to dinosaurs and then overlay for Lagia and Dalka. And as I've continued to say throughout this format, Dalka and Lagia are still really freaking good cards, especially Dalka in like the Dragon match. Like they don't really have a lot of ways to get over it without taking two sets of minuses. And yeah, they can get those back with Super Rejuvenation. But they have to waste a lot of cards usually to get past it. Even at that point, it's not like they can get rid of it with Big Eye. Generally, worst case scenario is that they breakthrough skill you, and then you're just gonna burn your materials so they can't use it against you, and so they take a 2200 vanilla away from you, or 2300. Oh man, I don't even know how much attack Dalka has. And then it's kind of the same thing with Lagia. It's not really great against Dragon Rulers, but it is pretty solid against spellbooks and can negate one of their key spellbook cards that they go for, like first turn, and then just like negate their summon, and then go from there. Isn't really that bad. Or you can just hold on to it and then either negate like a fate that's trying to go after you, or negate Spellbook of Judgment. So there's different options there, and having those cards accessible in decks like Evil Swarm and Constellar is pretty cool. Additionally, there's some other things you can do with that. Say your deck makes rank 6s. You can make a Volsar Solda. Solda's a pretty solid card. It's also really good against Dragon Rulers. It does a lot of cool things. So, DNA surgery, probably something that I'm going to be looking at in the future to see where its applications lie as new archetypes are released that do depend on certain monster types being on the field to work correctly. And that tends to happen quite a bit. There's a lot of type-based archetypes I think we'll be seeing going forward, especially now that we're out of the attribute phase. We're probably going to see a lot more type-based. Zombie World is another option. Kind of does the same thing. I know I talked about that. It is searchable via terraforming, and that's worth looking at. If you're if let's see, if you're running Terraforming 2, maybe look into something like Necro Valley. That might be a better option for your deck. And I think it has similar applications. So if you're looking for something like that as a counter, I would definitely look between Zombie World and Necro Valley, which is another card that I've kind of said is really good this format. I know Bob Butler wrote an article about it a couple weeks ago, before Nationals, I think, before the WCQ. And yeah, I really like that. I really like that card as well. So what else did we talk about? Yeah, so definitely goes in match. Imperial Iron Wall, Eradicator, big cards over the weekend, especially Imperial Iron Wall. I've been kind of surprised by how much this card is seeing play, but it's really important and it's really good. There's a reason why macro decks aren't really doing that well, and it's because people are citing Imperial Iron Wall. I know when I went to regionals in March, I cited two just to stop macro decks from ruining my day, and I was frequently flipping them up against Macro Rabbit, and they would just kind of like shrug at and be like, well, I guess I can't do anything. Sometimes it backfired though. And then, oh, what else did we talk about? I got a comment on something. Oh yeah, mistake, but we'll get to that later. Yeah, it's really just the WCQ is just interesting because of DNA surgery, and that's mostly what I wrote about in my article. And then, oh yes, hand traps. Um, it was interesting with especially Valor and Maxi. A lot of decks were maxing out copies, like straight up just six copies between Maxi and Effect Valor, generally with a Maxi stuck somewhere on the side deck. And then, so you get like 3 Valors and then 2 Maxi in the main deck and then a Maxi in the side deck. Just crazy numbers for a card that really punishes your opponent for going into longer special summon chains, and then also punishing your opponent for relying heavily on monster effects, which is definitely something that Dragon Rulers are doing. So building a deck that dodges both of those is pretty tough. And another reason these cards are seeing a lot of play, once again, macro isn't seeing play as much. Macrocosmos, Dimensional Fissure, they aren't out there in force. So if you do main deck all these hand traps, you're not suddenly watching your opponent flip Macrocosmos and then your whole hand goes dead because people are siding Imperial Iron Wall, so those macro decks are losing their games 2 and 3 to those cards. Pretty frequently, in fact. But Dragon Rulers, like, they lose to macro pretty quick. Especially if you just don't let yourself die out early. And then we've got this new fairy coming out. Our Archlord in Training. And I have totally forgotten what it's called. Judgment of the Light. It's, shoot. What's it called? Our 2800 DD Survivor monstrosity. Angel of Zero. Okay. The new secret rare in Judgment of the Light, which continues to come back every time it gets banished. Suddenly, this is enough to make Macrocosmos really interesting, because if you can loop this, it's just going to keep coming back again and again and again and again. And it gives the deck a little bit more force, and it applies a bit more pressure. So stuff like Dimensional Iados, which has been cast aside, could possibly make a comeback with a card like this. Because again, like, you flip the macro, now their Maxis are dead. Now their Effect Villars are dead. Now all their Dragon Rulers are dead. Now a lot of their Spellbook effects are dead. Now there's stuff like Kyrsion and Sombre are dead. You can stick things like Vanity's Emptiness on the board, and it'll just stay there forever. And there's a lot of ways to go with that, I think. And especially, going with looking at 4-axis and 3-axis Fire Fists in the next format. Macrocosmos screws them up too. Dimensional Fissure not so much, but Macro definitely does. So those are cards definitely think we'll be seeing more of in the future if people get away from siding the Imperial Iron Walls. That's going to happen first. And so, yeah, like I said, Drone Lockbird was a big played card, and then Swift Scarecrow also being a very important card over the weekend. And that is probably about it. So, okay, 15 minutes. I think that's about it for today. There isn't really anything I want to look at. Although, I guess we'll look at some card prices. I've done that in the past, and I think I might make that a thing. I kind of like ending my articles on little shopping spree type of look around stuff. Anyways, Mega Phantom Beast Dracosec still sitting around like 75, 80. It now seems to be about the price. So it's still going down, still going down, still going down. I'm curious to see if it's going to stay the same or go up a little bit or continue to go down even when the new Mecha Phantom Beast stuff comes out. If people start to do okay with that, whether or not its price will change. Personally, I'm playing the deck, and I've got a Draco Sec that I've been holding on to for a while just to play the new stuff in Judgment of the Light. And the card's awesome, obviously, but the deck itself needs some work, needs some innovation, but I think it can definitely do something. We're still waiting on 2 new World Premiere cards to be announced for Judgment of the Light. If they are potentially, if at least one of them, a Mecha Phantom Beast exclusive monster, maybe we could be looking at a format that includes Mecha Phantom Beast as a strong contender. I think it's a good deck already. A lot of the reason why is because it does play Macrocosmos in the main deck, or it can play Macrocosmos in the main deck, which I like. And it can play Rivalry of Warlords. It doesn't lose to the rivalry that Fire Fists are going to be playing. That's a big, big deal. I don't know if people realize that. Next format, Rivalry of Warlords is coming back in force. Like, yeah, dragons can still play all their dragons and stuff, but they can't Xyz summon into anything. And that's going to be a problem. Like, I really think that Rivalry is going to screw people up. Like, they're not going to see it coming. Potentially, the Mermail's coming back, depending on what happens with the ban list, but we'll see. And then, yeah, Republic of Judgment down to below $50, $45 now is what the price is on TCG Player. Continues to drop, but we'll see. Yeah, I would sell them off now if I were, waiting. I think World of Prophecy is an interesting card, just to play the deck differently. I know a lot of people will say that it's bad in the current version of Prophecy. I think a different build of Prophecy could potentially make use of it in a better way, but we'll see. And then Kyrsian Cardinals at 16 or $18 now, so that's actually the third most expensive card in the set. Then Kyrsian's at 16, Sombre's at 15. Like I said, people should be playing Constellar, and they're just not. I think it's probably one of the best decks in the format. I think it'd be better than Evil Swarm next format, but we'll see what the ban list does. And then, yeah, that's about it. Pinpoint Guard's still kind of sitting nice. I don't know if people are playing that. It doesn't really seem like it. I pulled one, sold it for 5. And we'll see. Anyways, that's about it for this week. We'll talk to you guys next week about the Pegasus Challenge, and next week's article should be on something secret. We'll find out. So thank you for listening, and until next time then.